Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting story because it goes back actually to about 2007 when I met with John Stanhope, a long-standing friend of mine who was then the Chief Financial Officer of Telstra. He's now the Chairman of Australia Post. And he asked, how do you develop a customer-centric culture? Because he wanted to do this in Telstra, particularly in the finance and administration group. And so it got me thinking about some key questions in this area. And one of those was, why are most companies not actually customer focused even when they say they want to be? And we know that this is the case because Forrester research and other research has shown that about 90% of companies say they're customer focused, but only 10% of customers actually agree. So this was a key question. Another question is, well, what is customer centricity and how do you get there? And a third one was, well, if customer centricity is something that people think is important, is it actually important to business performance? So we set about doing some research into this particular area, and as a result we've come up with this book which is called The Customer Culture Imperative. And we've named it that way because we see that in today's world, with tremendous change and disruptive technology and so on that's going on, just about every industry is being affected by change. And our research shows that having a customer culture is imperative for survival and prosperity of organisations. Well, the themes have really come out of something we could think of as the 90-90 phenomenon, which is the research that shows that 90% of companies believe that they're customer focused, but 90% of customers actually disagree. So out of this we said, well, here's a challenge. What we should be focusing on are really three or so key themes in this book. And one of them is to recognise that customer centricity or customer focus is actually a culture in the organisation. And what that means is that it needs to pervade all parts of the business, all functions, all levels, all activities ought to be centred around the customer as a driver of the decisions that are actually taken. And they're taken in a way that they create, out of all parts of the business, customer value. So customer culture is one key theme, and again that's in the title, the Customer Culture Imperative. A second thing is that it appears that most companies do not measure the customer centricity or customer focus, or we're calling it customer culture, that they actually have. And if you, as Peter Drucker I think said, if you don't measure something, you don't manage it. And so we felt that we needed to develop a way of measuring this, and so there's a whole theme around customer culture measurement. And the third theme is really about the links between customer culture and business performance. We wanted to show, and we do actually show in this book, that the different dimensions that we've discovered of customer centricity are linked to different business performance outcomes like revenue growth, profitability, new product success, and all the normal sort of business performance measures that companies actually use. And we've been able to show how each of these dimensions actually tie in to the performance outcomes of businesses. I think the big difference with this book, The Customer Culture Imperative, is that the whole book and all of the parts of it are really based on research. And this research has involved, firstly, developing a measurement tool that has identified 7 clear dimensions of customer culture which are linked to business performance outcomes like revenue, profit, new product success, and innovation. And the other parts of the research have involved looking at not only strong customer culture companies, but also weak ones. And we've looked at companies like Amazon.com, Salesforce, Costco, Virgin, as examples of companies that are very strong customer culture companies. But we've also looked at a lot of companies that are just not so strong, and we've noticed the differences in the performance of those different organisations. The other thing that we've done, which I think is very important, is through the research and in studying the practices of many different companies, the good ones and the not so good ones, we've found how companies actually get to develop a customer-centric culture. And in doing that, we've identified a roadmap or set of steps that companies go through to develop from a weak to a strong customer culture over time. So these things, all based on research, really form the big difference that this book has against many others that are in the market. I think the best way to explain this is to talk about the fact that companies that have a very strong customer culture have in everybody in the business a mindset around the belief that what's best for the customer is best for the business. And I think the way to test this out and to illustrate this is with a story that I'd like to tell you about a company in the United States. And it's a story that shows what you do if you have a strong customer culture when something goes wrong. And I think that's the test. The company is based in Connecticut on the east coast of the USA, and it's a cycle company called Chris Zane Cycles. And they've been in business for more than 25 years. They've had growth every year from the start because Chris Zane himself is a very customer-focused person, and he's been able to instill this mindset of what's best for the customer is best for the business in all the staff. And in this particular instance, this organisation is a mid-sized company. It sells product, bicycles, all over the country. And the two main brands are Trek and Specialized, big brands in the US of bicycle, and they are the number one dealer in the country. And it's no accident, because I think when we hear the story, we'll understand how it is that they've actually got there. And this is the story of a woman who wanted to buy a bike for her husband as a birthday present. She had a special request. She came into the shop, she paid half the $800 cost of the bike, $400, and said, look, I'll pay the rest when we pick it up tomorrow, but tonight we're going to be out at a restaurant just across the road with all of our friends, and I'd like you to put the bike in the window so that we'll come across the road after we've had dinner, and I'll show my husband, all his friends, what his new bike is actually going to look like. It's going to be there in the window. That evening they went to dinner, they had a wonderful time, came across the road, and the bike was not in the showroom window. Instead, there was some sort of latest cycling hero there, but the bike was not there. And she was embarrassed. It was a very awkward time for her. And so the next morning she rang up and said, look, the bike wasn't in the window. What actually happened? And the manager of the shop said, well, we're terribly sorry. We'll find out what's actually happened, and we'll set it right for you. So they had a talk about it, and they decided that they would, he would go out, the store manager, and say, well, look, we're very sorry about this. We apologise. We'll forgive the remaining $400 that you owe on this bike. Here's a voucher for dinner for the two of you, and we've got some vouchers for your friends for lunches in any restaurant that they want to go to in the town where they live. She was very, very taken aback by this, very happy. And in fact, when he rang back to the shop, he said, as the Americans do over there, dude, she actually kissed me. So it was a very good story, but you know, the real kicker to this particular story is that the person who was responsible in the back part of the store to actually put that bike out front in the window and forgotten to do so, wrote a cheque for $400 and gave it to Chris Zane and said, this is my contribution to what the company's lost as a result of me stuffing this up. So, you know, there is an example of what a customer-centric company does when something goes wrong, and how employees, all employees in an organisation, should think when they have a belief about what's best for the customer is best for the business. Now, the other thing that I think is very important about the Chris Zane Cycles business is that for many, many years he has developed this measure of the lifetime value of a customer. How much is a customer worth to us as a business if they come back year after year and get the bikes maintained, buy a new bike, buy a bike for the kids? What's that actually worth? And it comes to, so Chris Zane told us, around $12,500 on average. And the thing about this is that it's not so much about the money, but it's really about what that says to people who work in the business. What's important are the long-term relationships that we establish with our customers, because those long-term relationships are the things that create loyalty and bring back repeat business and create value for the business. Hence, what's best for the customer is best for the business. So I would ask you, in your organisation, how widespread is that mentality or mindset in your business about what's best for the customer is best for the business? And if it's not widespread, what are you going to do about it? Well, from research, we found that there were 7 disciplines or practices that link to business performance that we can think of as being customer culture practices or customer culture disciplines. And we have a model that identifies these 7 disciplines, and this model is available for you to download, and I encourage you to actually do that so that you can see visually what it actually looks like. So the 7 disciplines really fall down into 5 that are externally focused disciplines and 2 that are internally focused within the organisation. The 5 that are externally focused start firstly with 2 what we could think of as customer disciplines. The first of these is called customer insight, and that's really to do with understanding your current customers, how they behave, how they buy, what their preferences are, and what we need to do to provide value to them. The second customer discipline is customer foresight, and that's really about future value creation. It's about future customers and what we need to be doing as practices or disciplines in the business to create an understanding of what future value should be provided. We have also 2 competitor practices or disciplines that make up some of the 5 externally oriented disciplines. The first we call competitor insight, and competitor insight is really about understanding current competitors, what they're doing, what there is their strategic intent, how we would react to them, how they would react to us. It's a very thorough knowledge of how we sit in the marketplace in terms of value delivery and creation in relation to current competitors, and that's competitor insight. The second one of competitors is competitor foresight, and again that's about future competitors. In some cases competitors that don't exist but that will emerge in the future and have an impact on the value that's created for our customers. So this is relevant to the future of our business and to the future of the value that we need to create for our customers by understanding what's happening there with potential future competitors. The 5th external oriented discipline is something we think of as peripheral vision. You know that a lot of external, wider environmental things are going on that are changing. Disruptive technology, economic changes, political and legislative changes, the natural environment. All of these things are having an impact on the way in which customers think, the way in which they behave, the value they perceive that's important to them. And we see with all the online developments that are going on how retail has been affected, traditional shop retail versus online retail. We see that now in many industries. So peripheral vision is a very important cultural discipline for an organisation to actually have, and I'm going to talk more about that in later videos. So they're the five, the two customer ones, the two competitor ones, the peripheral vision, and then there are two internally oriented disciplines which make up the seven. One of those is collaboration. We've found in our research that those companies that are able to get teams to work together across functions are able to create more value, be more innovative, be quicker to market, provide more value for customers, and in return get more value back for the business. And then finally, the seventh one we've called strategic alignment. And strategic alignment is having everybody in the organisation understand what the vision is, what the objectives are, what the strategy is of the business, and know how to translate that into what they actually do in their part of the business in creating value for customers. So they're the seven disciplines. I'm going to talk separately in little short video sessions about each one of those and give you an example of how that plays out in organisations. So let's look forward to having a look at each of those disciplines in turn, and they are ones that you can go into next.